Okay, the final PowerPoint on AC 3.2, the contribution of agencies to achieving social control. And I'm going to deal with two topics in this one. First of all, I'm going to look at the tactics and measures that are used by the various agencies to achieve social control. And then I'm going to look at gaps in state provision. Now, both of these topics will also come through to AC 3.3, and I'll be dealing with these in a lot more detail, but this is just a general outline of the two areas. So, we know that the institutions and agencies within the criminal justice system have got a range of tactics that they use to enforce people to obey the rules, thereby achieving social control. So if we take the court system, they can sentence offenders to various punishment, and by doing that they can achieve both individual and general deterrence, because punishment can put the convicted offender off repeating their crime because they haven't enjoyed the punishment and therefore they've learned from that, but also it serves as a lesson to the public in general. If the public sees someone be punished for a crime, i.e. sent to prison, they look at that and think, I don't want that to happen to me, and therefore they don't commit crime, and therefore we have social control. They toe the line, they obey the laws. The courts can also issue community orders, which require offenders to rehabilitate, so they can force someone to undergo drug or alcohol addiction treatment. And what you're trying to do there is to get the person to change their problem behaviour patterns, thereby reforming them, thereby achieving social control. Now, if we look at the Probation Service, obviously they're supervising and monitoring the behaviour of offenders. We know that already that they supervise community service orders. They also supervise those prisoners that have been released from prison on licence, on parole. And we know that if the offender fails to meet the requirements of their licence, the Probation Service can, well, they just ring the police and ask for that person to be returned to prison to serve the rest of their sentence, or they have to go to court for resentencing. So again, there's that element of deterrence there, and of course ensuring that people behave because they're being checked on, so we've got social control once again. If we look at the prison service itself, we've already looked at some of these. They've got a set of rules that apply to all prisons, and a prison governor can actually enforce further local rules within their prison. And the prison rules in general cover the following offences for prisoners. So whilst they're inside prison, if they offend, threaten or hurt someone, they've broken a rule. If they prevent staff from performing their jobs, they've broken a rule. If they escape, they've broken a rule, and the likelihood is if they escape, they'll be put in a higher category prison. Usually escapees are put in Cat A prisons. If they use drugs or alcohol, they've broken the rules. If they damage the prison, they've broken the rules. If they're in possession of forbidden items such as a knife or a mobile phone, broken the rules. And if they're somewhere in the prison they shouldn't be, again, they've broken the rules. And if they don't do as the staff tell them, they've broken the rules. Now, there are a range of punishments open to prison governors and staff, and these include a caution, a loss of earned privileges, so they earn less money, they're not allowed to eat outside communally, loss of gym time, loss of recreation time, they won't be allowed a TV in their cells, those sort of things. There's cellular confinement, which we would more commonly know as solitary confinement, being prevented from working or receiving money earned from working. And all these punishments are time limited. For instance, in our country, you can only issue 35 days of solitary confinement and no more in any one sentence. More serious offences, the prison regime can actually add extra days to a prisoner's sentence, up to 42 in total. And as I've said before, if you try and escape, a higher security prison awaits you with much more restrictions. Now, in general, in our country, all the agencies for social control use phased discipline. What is that, you might ask? Well, it's how we achieve social control. So in general, you phase the enormity of the punishment. A first offence, whether in prison or in the wider society, usually carries a lower sentence, a lesser punishment. It's more lenient. So in prisons, it might be loss of privileges for a few days for prisoners, or a warning if you're a member of the public from the police, or a police caution, or in the courts a conditional discharge, that sort of thing. And then as people repeat offending, what happens is the punishment becomes more serious. It's much more likely to be a stronger sanction, such as probation or prison, because what you're trying to do there is achieve social control by deterring future misbehaviour. Now, some people might argue that you need to go in hard and that gives you better deterrence. However, that is not how we do that, how we do it in this country. In general, we go for phased discipline, less for a first offence. Now, this leads us on to gaps in state provision. So we've got all these ways that the different agencies achieve social control. And as I said in a later AC, I'm going to deal with this in much more detail. But nothing's perfect, and there are flaws in the system, and there are gaps where people slip through the net. So we know that the police, the Crown Prosecution, courts, prisons, Probation Service, etc., all achieve some degree of social control over antisocial behaviour, but it's never complete. And there are a number of reasons behind this. So first of all, it's resources. The funding of state agencies of social control mainly comes from taxes. And there are numerous state agencies that are competing for that limited supply of taxpayers' money. So governments have got competing demands for resources from sectors such as the NHS, education, pensions, welfare, local authority services, defence, etc., as well as agencies of social control. So there's only so far the money can go. And there's a little chart for you, and you can see how much we compare in terms of our costs of keeping someone in prison for a day. I think that is £118 a day. Yes. Budget cuts are also an issue. We've been in financial crisis since 2008. We've had government spending cuts. We've had reorganisations. That's had a huge impact on state agencies, particularly the agencies for social control. And it's reduced their effectiveness in maintaining that social control. For example, between 2010 and 2018, the police budget was cut by 19%. That's led to a fall of 20,000 in police numbers. Now, with the best will in the world, if you've got 20,000 less police officers in the street, your budget's been cut by 90%. There is no way you could be as effective in achieving social control. And here you can see the change just spending on prisons over the past few years and how it has reduced. The Crown Prosecution Service was cut by 25%, lost a third of its staff. Prison budgets, as I've shown you from the chart, fell by 16%, and staff levels have reduced as well. So you've got less people on the job, you've got less money to do the job. The inevitability is the job's not going to be as effective, and therefore achieving social control isn't going to be as effective. The other thing to also consider, and you can use this across most exam answers if you get anything about barriers to particularly the police, is new technology. And this is a real problem for the police force at the moment. Digital technology has risen exponentially. It's absolutely massive. If I think to when I first started teaching many years ago, we didn't have any computers in the school. There was no such thing as a mobile phone. And now everyone's using them. We have technology in the palm of our hands and masses of data. Now, in 2018, the head of the CPS said that the criminal justice system was actually unable to cope with the huge amounts of data being generated by technology. And she actually said one recent rape case where they met on Tinder took 600 police hours to go through the digital material. So one case, just checking the technology, 600 police hours in an already limited police budget. As we've seen before, police numbers have been cut. So think about the impact that has on social control. Or, as the head of CPS said, you can have a judge say in a case, I want a download of that iPad. And the reality, if a judge says that, it can take 15 officers working all weekend just to get that technology off, because the storage is so massive. Just problems checking mobile phones for evidence have led to failures to disclose evidence and a fall in the number of rape and sexual offence charges. So technology has a massive impact. And the cost is also there as well. So if the police want to use the new technology such as DNA profiling, that costs money and poses a limitation on the police's ability to investigate offences. We then move on to unreported crime. Now, the criminal justice agencies can only investigate, prosecute and convict offenders if the offence has been reported. And we know that only about 40% of crimes are reported to the police, and different types of crimes have different reporting rates. Now, you did this in other units within the course, so you can use that to inform any question you get on this in the exam. So, for example, the stats at the moment show that only 1 in 4 rapes and attempted rapes are reported, which means that 3/4 of rapes or all attempted rapes are not reported at all to the police. An estimated 2 million domestic abuse cases occurred in 2018, but not all were reported. Only 600,000 were recorded. So 1.4 million not recorded at all. White collar and corporate crime often goes unreported because people are unaware they've been victims, for example, of fraud, overcharging, environmental pollution, that sort of thing. And the other thing we have to consider is existing laws. So social control by the justice agencies, it can only be achieved as long as there are appropriate laws in place to begin with. So sometimes a new type of harm emerges where there's no existing law to forbid it. And so the agencies are unable to bring prosecutions to control that behaviour. So think of the rise in new technology. We've had to bring laws in to deal with that. Think about drug driving and some of the campaigns that you would have looked at in Unit 1 and how those laws needed to be brought in. All those things, as technology, as society moves on, the law needs to be in place in order for the police to enforce it. So if we take the example we're looking at the moment, we're in lockdown for COVID-19. New laws have had to be brought in as to how bars and restaurants behave with customers, how many people can be out at one time on the street, and who has the power to enforce that. Do the police have the power or not? You have to wear a mask in a shop. What if you don't? Can the police arrest you? Is there a law to stop them doing that? Or can they just tell you to put a mask on, but they can't actually do anything else? Those things you need to consider, because that's a barrier. We also need to consider social media and the law, and there's been a huge debate about the responsibility of certain social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter and YouTube for allowing offensive and harmful material to be published on them. For example, if we take the right-wing terrorist who massacred 51 Muslims in mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand in 2019, he was able to actually live stream that massacre on social media. Totally unacceptable. If such material was published in a traditional way, so if that was done as a film or a book or a newspaper article, the publisher of that would be held criminally liable. But social media companies claim they don't publish the material. They're merely the hosts. It's the perpetrator that's published the material. And currently in the UK, they can't be prosecuted for the material found on their sites. All you can do is report it and ask for it to be removed or blocked. Increasingly, that is now starting to happen, but there is technically no law against it at the moment.